Chapter 9. By the time I get to art class, which is last period of the day, I am the Freedom Party's candidate for treasurer. I do not know how this happened. I suspect it went something like this. Addie: "So, Bobby, you'll be treasurer, okay?" Me: "Okay." If you are wondering why it never occurs to me to say no to Addie, that is because you do not know Addie. Or me. Addie does not take no for an answer, and I do not know how to give it for one. Another thing I have said yes to is asking Colin Briggs if he will run for secretary. I think Colin running for secretary makes even less sense than me running for treasurer, and I tell Addie so. Me: "Colin is a boy. He will not want to run for secretary." Addie: "You are a sexist pig. Colin won't care. Besides, he likes to write." Me: "But shouldn't we have another girl on the ticket?" I ask this, thinking this will make sense to Addie, of course, who is such a feminist that she once wrote a letter to her church asking that hymns be called hers. She did not succeed. Addie: "You have a point, but let's ask Colin first. As much as I hate admitting it, I think that it is important that we have one other popular person on the ballot." I find this logic distinctly un-Addie-like, considering that there are popular girls we could ask, but I do not at that moment possess the crucial nugget of information that will later explain her odd behavior. What I do know is this: while Colin is one of the popular kids, he is different from most of them. He's nice, for one thing. Not that some of the other popular kids aren't nice, but they have different ways of showing it depending on who's on the receiving end. When Brittany talks to you, for instance, you get the feeling she is being polite and showing that she knows how to behave around those less fortunate than herself. Sort of like she's Mother Teresa and you're a leper. Colin isn't like that. He acts the same with everybody, so you end up feeling like an actual person around him. He is also one of those people who are good at everything they do, but you do not hate him for this, because it does not swell his head to the size of a watermelon. For example, he's a natural athlete, but doesn't go around talking sports all the time or thinking it's the end of the world if his team doesn't win. In fact, he is quiet for a boy, and does not favor rude words or sounds such as those produced by sticking your hand in your armpit and giving it a squeeze. When I walk into Mr. Manelli's room, I am a few minutes late, on account of Mrs. DePaulo having stopped me in the hall and asking if I could help her pick up about 1,000 flyers she just dropped on the floor. I hand my late pass to Mr. Manelli, then sit down in my seat across from Joe and get ready to dirty my hands with charcoal. Joe's going at his drawing so hard he doesn't even notice me come in, although I am suspecting the real reason he doesn't look up has more to do with one of the two characters sitting on either side of him than his passion for drawing. One of these characters is Kelsey Scoggins. She's the new girl I told you about, who is so shy you can hardly notice her breathing. Mr. Manelli is always looking over her shoulder and making noises, because, like I say, he thinks Kelsey is a genius. Whenever he holds up her work to show the rest of the class, which he's already done about 3 times and we've only had 4 classes, Kelsey puts her head down on her desk and dies. I'm guessing, though, that her talent as an artist is what keeps her going. I mean, shyness that bad isn't just a part of your personality. It's like an illness, and I'll bet on a stack of waffles that it hurts like one. You probably thought I was going to say pancakes just there, didn't you? Well, anyhow, whilst I'm sitting there staring at her without realizing that's what I'm doing, she looks up and makes eye contact with me for about a nanosecond, and that's enough to turn her cheeks the color of a strawberry shake and get her ducking her head back down so that her hair falls in front of her eyes. But not before I make out what I'm almost positive is a smile. Then I'm thinking, I never noticed that Kelsey Scoggins is pretty. This thought does not surprise me too much because, after all, hardly anybody notices Kelsey. But the following thought does surprise me, and it is this: I think maybe she likes me. Then I think, yeah, right. A pretty girl, even one who is socially handicapped like Kelsey Scoggins, does not like a boy like me. And what is a boy like me, you may ask? Even if you did not, I will tell you. A boy like me is fat. There, I said it. I'm relieved to be pulled away from these thoughts by the sound of the person on the other side of Joe. He is all of a sudden talking to Joe in a low voice, pointing at Joe's drawing, and Joe's saying things back like, Really? You really think it's good? Joe is acting like a Joe when he says these things, not a Jordan or a Scorpio, and it's funny at first to see him acting this way, almost what I would call normal. But then I think that it isn't all that funny, because the person he's talking to is Colin. After class, I go over to Colin, who is at the sink watching charcoal off his hands. I'm only slightly nervous about approaching him because, like I say, he's not too hard to talk to. And so I only need to take a handful and so I only need a handful of fake conversation starters before getting down to business. Addie and I were wondering, well, you heard about the Freedom Party, right? Well, we were wondering if you would like to be on our ticket. I do not yet let on that we are talking about secretary here. Oh, gee, I'm really sorry, Bobby, he says, like he honestly means it, but I'm already running on another ticket. For secretary? I ask. I cannot seem to keep this to myself. Colin smiles. No, vice president. With Brittany? He shakes his head. Drew, he says, I'm a Democrat. Oh, I say, I've run out of dialogue. Sometimes I wish I were a character in a book and there was a writer out there giving me things to say. This is one of those times. I just stand there, feeling stupid. It's too bad I didn't know before the nominating convention, Colin says, wiping his hands on a paper towel and making way for me at the sink. I mean, I don't know if I would have said yes or not. Drew's my friend and all, but, well, I think Addie's really smart. I have a lot of respect for her. Good luck, he says, and walks away. I turn and see that he slows down when he passes Joe and Kelsey, who are standing a few people behind me in line, talking to each other. I watch carefully to make out if Kelsey's lips are actually moving, but it's mostly Joe doing the talking, and I notice his lips speed up just when Colin slows down. 15 minutes later, if you believe the clock in the hall, and 21 minutes later, if you believe the clock in Miss Wyman's room, I tell Addie Colin said no. Her face practically falls off, she is so disappointed, but then she pulls it right back on. No sense dwelling on it, she says. Addie, as you have no doubt surmised by now, is a mover and a shaker. She rarely dwells. So we're huddled at the back of Miss Wyman's room, Addie, Duchan, and me, when Addie goes, Okay, we have to plan our strategy quickly. The Democrats and the Republicans held their conventions during 7th period, and they've put together their slates and their platforms. We're still short a candidate, and we don't have our platform. I thought it was free the slaves, Duchan quips, and Addie gives him a look that needs no interpretation. Anyway, he goes on, returning the look, what makes you think Miss Wyman is going to allow the Freedom Party to exist? Simple, because she has to. Addie raises her voice to accommodate the growing din of middle school politicians filling the room. I went to the office after lunch and asked to see the student council bylaws. She pulls out a piece of paper on which she's written, More than 2 parties shall be allowed if the additional parties can prove they serve a purpose not served by the existing parties. I'm telling you, free the slaves, Duchan says again. No way the other 2 parties are going to have that as their platform. Is it genetic coding or something that boys can't be serious? Addie goes. Duchan rolls his eyes. I get the feeling he's as serious about this whole political party thing as I am. Which is to say, not. I know that I'm involved because Addie is my friend and I don't know how to say no. I have not yet figured Duchan's angle. All of a sudden, Addie gets all excited. Look around the room, she says. What do you see? More important, what don't you see? We look around the room. I do not see any fish, Duchan gives. And, I put in, I note a discernible absence of lawn ornaments. Duchan cracks up and flashes his palm for a high 5, which I give him. Or almost, anyway. I'm off center, so it's more like a high 3. And I'm well on my way to totally betraying my lifelong friendship with Addie for the buzz I'm feeling from having actually made a certifiable popular person laugh with me and not at me. When Miss Wyman marches into the room with so much authority, I pop out of my seat ready to sing God Save the Queen. Yes, Mr. Goodspeed? Miss Wyman asks, noting that I am the only one standing. May I be excused? I ask. I cannot think what else to say. Addie looks at me as if I have completely lost my mind, which I venture to say I have. When Miss Wyman gives me permission to leave, I shrug at Addie and mouth, "I'll be right back." She mouths back, "You are made of gorgonzola." That probably isn't what she says, but that's what it looks like. Anyway, while counting to 100 outside Miss Wyman's room, I suddenly spot Skeezy Tukas lurking down the hall. I would like to think that there is another word to describe his behavior, but lurking is a perfect fit. Ordinarily, Skeezy is not a lurker. Even those of an adult persuasion who have called him a young hooligan have never combined the accusation with the word lurk or any of its derivatives. Yet, there he is, lurking. "Skeez!" I call out in a hushed sort of way, not wanting Miss Wyman to hear me, and suddenly appear in the hall to ask why I needed to be excused in order to count to 100. The Skeez looks over his shoulder, but not like he's heard me, and not so far that he sees me. He's got this whole furtive way about him, which makes sense, considering that he's lurking and all. I wonder what he's up to, but I do not call out to him again. Instead, I pull myself back behind a fire extinguisher, so that if he happens to look down the hall in my direction, he will not see me. Although, he will see a fire extinguisher with legs. I pop my head out just in time to catch him in the act of shoving something through the slots of a locker. I make out which locker it is and wait for Skeezy to cease his lurking and scurry away. Actually, he does not scurry. He cops an attitude and moves down the hall, bobbing his head and snapping his fingers like he's John Travolta in that movie, Grease. It's a relief seeing him act like himself, and the thought occurs to me that in the space of a couple of hours, all my friends have been acting strange. The theme to Invasion of the Body Snatchers starts playing inside my head. I have got to stop watching all those old movies. Why in the world, I am thinking, would Skeezy be putting something in Colin Briggs' locker? 98, 99, 100, I say. I turn around and bump smack into Addie. "Is your mental health break over?" she asks. "Because if it is, you are desperately needed inside. Miss Wyman is threatening to disallow the Freedom Party. You've got to help us convince her that we serve a purpose not served by the other parties." "Do we have a purpose?" I ask. "Of course," Addie says. "Deshawn and I worked it all out. We are the party who speaks on behalf of the minority students of Paintbrush Falls Middle School." "Who am I supposed to speak on behalf of?" I give back. "The overweight and undervocal?" Addie does not find this funny or even seem to hear me. She is staring at something past my right shoulder. I turn and look, but nothing's there. "Let's go," she says. And we do.